Good morning to everybody on the screens around the globe. We're supposed to be here talking to Audrey Tang, the digital minister of Taiwan. But as you can see, at least for now, Audrey has not yet arrived. I believe she's going to be here in a second because we organized everything quite well, I believe. So I'd say we just wait for a second, and I use the time. Oh, here we go, Minister Tang.
Hello, I believe I'm right on time.
You're like 20 seconds late, but that's
completely I'm sorry.
Okay.
There must be this time dilation thing, but anyway,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. Good morning or good afternoon to Taiwan.
Yes, good local time, everyone.
Yes, I hope you're fine. We're live already, and thanks so much for joining. Minister, I was just about to say what your role is, that you're the digital minister of Taiwan. I believe, as we're like in a political talk on the one hand, but also this is like political education TV, if you want. It would be great if you could give us like a brief introduction on the status of Taiwan and your political position and the government you're in. Just a short, brief introduction.
Sure. So, hi, I'm Taiwan's digital minister in charge of social innovation and open government. We're a country of 23 million people. However, it's mostly islands, and the main island called Taiwan is just 95 minutes, taking the high-speed rails from the northmost to the southmost municipality. So it's a very packed place. And even on the top of our mountain, almost 4,000 meters high, the Savia, Yushan Mountain, we ensure broadband as a human right. So if anywhere, including in the top of that mountain, you don't have 10 megabits per second for 16 euros per month unlimited data connection, that's personally my fault. That's what digital minister means. It is to ensure that a society can work with latest technologies in the service of the society, not asking people to adapt to technology. And this is this like 1 minute brief of my work.
Great, thank you. We already understood how you understand your role as a digital minister. To your background, you've been a hacker.
I am still a hacker. Thank you. Yeah.
And so I think that's quite a unique situation, having a digital minister. In Germany, we don't have one, and especially having a digital minister who is really like an expert who used to be in private hacking before is a special situation. But I have to start with something else, I believe, because as a minister of Taiwan, you also have to be involved in geopolitics in a way, I believe.
And sustainable goals.
I think,
this is the pin of sustainable development goals, and it says Taiwan can help. That is our geopolitical statement.
Yeah, but also talking about the situation of Taiwan, because you're in a permanent struggle, talking about your relationship with China, and for the last decades, we have to say, your most important partner, also in the military section, was the United States. So now we're facing a situation where you're facing threats of China, recent threats over the last weeks, and at the same time, we see the US struggling not only with the coronavirus, but also last night, I believe you've heard of that,
of course.
even using the military inside the own country, which hasn't happened for the last 200 years. So from your perspective, how do you feel about this?
Yeah, I think democracy is another social technology. It's not a fixed institution. It improves only as more people participate. And we see in the recent years that digital technologies is one of the best ways to improve participation. It's good for finding common ground, that is to say pro-social media, but it's also very good at causing division and ideological fights online, and that's the anti-social media. And it seems that the digital technologist at the very beginning says we're neutral, that technology doesn't have an ideology, and these are being challenged nowadays. We now ask all the platform designers, including myself, are you designing digital technologies for people to find the common ground, a rough consensus? Or are you doing this not to the service of the people, but rather to heighten existing social divisions and make people even more angry at each other compared to the previous pre-social media days? And I think this is definitely something that Taiwan has something to share, because we managed to avoid all the pitfalls of the social media and the polarization, and actually currently has a pretty good plural democracy that we are happy to share to other liberal democracies that are considering takedown or lockdown because of the adverse effects of the digital age.
But talking about the current situation, like you want to share your thoughts and your findings with other liberal democracies. But how about, the US is a close ally. Other liberal democracies are, but how do you feel about having your closest ally and your most important ally maybe struggling like this? It's like, do you have people calling you and asking how can you help? This would be a bit strange, I believe.
Previously, epicenter to epicenter relationship is our norm here, so that we have I personally offered my advices when there was what they call infodemic, I think, in different outbreak epicenters, when there's panic buying of tissue papers, panic buying of other PPEs, and so on. And even before the WHO, the World Health Assembly, we held 14-country minilateral virtual meeting, kind of a pre-meeting to the WHO, where people talked about the social frustration and the anxiety and the stress that people feel because of the lockdowns and other measures. And we shared how Taiwan counters those using collective intelligence, humor versus rumor, and a sense of radical transparency. So I think, as with any other liberal democracy, we're constantly trying to find ways that we can address these social issues while promoting democracy instead of taking things down or to enforce a even more strict authoritarian rule. And it may sometimes be not easy for other liberal democracies to not sacrifice privacy or not sacrifice the freedom of speech when countering the coronavirus, but we managed to do so without declaring any emergency situation, any constitutional authorization to the administration to do things first and for the legislation to approve later. We've never had that. So at the moment, we're still working under normal law, the continental law system that is. And so a lot of those social designs and mechanism designs are just part of the Taiwan model that we're very happy to share with our allies.
Can you give us a more in-depth idea of the three pillars you mentioned?
Yeah, sure. So these are fast, fair, and fun, respectively. So fast, for example, one example is that every day at 2 p.m., we have a daily press conference that's been going on for more than 3 months now. And everybody can see the 1922, which is a single hotline that anybody with any idea can just pick up their phone and call 1922. And so, for example, there was a day in April, there was a young boy that refused to go to school because all they have is pink medical mask. And they don't want to go to school because his schoolmates may laugh at him for wearing a pink medical mask. So someone told 1922 that. And the very next day, you can see that everybody in the CECC press conference start wearing pink medical mask. And making sure that everybody learns about gender mainstreaming, which is also a social innovation. And so this kind of rapid response builds trust between the government and the civil society, because people understand that this is for everyone to mobilize to counter the coronavirus. Even from last year, the end of December, when Dr. Li Wenliang shared on social media that there's new SARS coming, 7 confirmed cases in the Huanan wet food market, it gets reposted to PTT, the Taiwan equivalent of Reddit. And when they did that, we not only emailed WHO of that, but also inspected the flights coming from Wuhan the very next day, the first day of January. And this shows that the government trusts the citizens enough to make sure that instead of, disappearing people who do so, or to take down such posts, or to give a warning, as Dr. Li Wenliang eventually faced, we just amplify that into the CCC and set up the command center even before we have the first confirmed case. So that's the collective intelligence part where everybody feels that they can take part into the co-creation of the counter-coronavirus strategy that will be aired live the very next day, 2 p.m. Christoph, I think I lost your voice somehow.
Okay, you hear me again?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. Just give our viewers and listeners an idea of how successful Taiwan was. I'll give them the newest numbers. Taiwan with, as you said, I think 24 million inhabitants, around 24 million inhabitants, so not a small country, had only 443 confirmed cases.
Most of which are overseas, not local, and only 7 deaths. And
Exactly.
We've been a month with no new confirmed cases. So we never had a lockdown or closing any businesses. And next week, even the remaining suggestions like not hold very large gatherings will be lifted.
I believe one of the reasons why you were successful, apart from the things you mentioned, was also that you had a history with the SARS virus already.
No, we were inoculated, so to speak. Yeah.
Pardon?
We're inoculated. The society is not inoculated because people still remember the 2003 SARS and how chaotic it was, how the municipal government and central government say two very different things, how we had to barricade an entire hospital in a lockdown with no definite time of termination and so on. And all of this taught at least everybody above 30 years old, myself included, how important, for example, medical mask is, and the other things associated with SARS 1.0. Of course, this is not SARS 2.0, it's a different strain, but at the very beginning, we just run yearly drills as if SARS will happen every year, a kind of almost like mobilization drill. And now, after we see this on the social media, December last year, we just kicked everything into action.
So from your point of view, would you say that like the world society, if you want, will be better prepared for like a maybe upcoming a second wave of Corona just because people are learning?
Yes, definitely. I think everybody who now learns some epidemiology understand how important core technologies such as soap and hand sanitation sprays is, and also physical distancing. And the proper use of mask. In Taiwan, we use it as a symbol. If I put it on, it means that I'm going to wash my hand. It means that I'm not going to touch my face all the time. And we remind other people to do the same to protect themselves as well. And all of that is like cultural vaccination. The next time when the next wave comes, or even SARS 3.0 comes, everybody will be better prepared, as Taiwan was prepared during SARS 2.0, that is to say the current coronavirus.
So all the things you mentioned right now are more like basic technologies. So it's not got nothing to do with digital technologies. But at the same time, you were using social media a lot. You were also using a tracking and tracing app.
No, we've
not at all. Not even voluntarily.
We've never used Bluetooth or any other technology or GPS when it comes to tracing. And the reason why is that we did the quarantining, like quarantine hotel or the home quarantine at the borders, so that we never enter community spread. If you don't have a community spread, there's very little use of the app level tracing.
Okay, but then, because all the Western societies, if you want, at least in Europe, are discussing introducing such an app.
Yes.
And what is from your point of view as an expert, what is your idea of that? Like, how do you see this?
Well, like mask, they're not the factor, the most dominant factor. The most dominant factor of controlling the R0 is soap and alcohol sprays, and physical distancing. That's the consensus of the scientific community. And also, like mask, apps are only useful if a sufficient number of people use it. And so I think it's best if it's built upon something that people already know, is already open source, people already trust, and that they will not compromise each other's privacy if they ask their friends and family to do so. And also it provides some benefit to the person, not entirely altruistic. And all of these are careful considerations that we did when we introduced the Mask for All program of mask rationing. And you will notice that I didn't say I wear a mask to protect others or respect others. I said I wear a mask to protect myself, remind myself not to touch my face, because this is the kind of ideas that spread with a higher R value. And even in a room with many people, with only a few people saying that you should wear a mask because it protects yourself, that idea spreads faster than appealing to collectivism or altruism or things like that. So think very carefully about incentives design, and also think very carefully about privacy, because only when people feel that this app is primarily serving their best interest instead of some cloud provider's best interest, will people massively start adopting it to a meaningful number.
So listening to you and also reading about Taiwan's way, one could think we could learn a lot of Taiwan's way.
Definitely.
And at the same time, we have this discussion going on, talking about the World Health Organization, that because of the One China policy, because China wouldn't let you, let's take it that way, you're not a member of the World Health Organization, so you don't have the platform there to share your ideas, to share your learnings. And would you say, from your perspective, that this has killed people in the world? Would you say that if you had the platform and if you had the ability to share what you learned with other countries on this platform, it would have saved lives?
Well, we had limited scientific access and, of course, no ministerial access. And these two are not the same. I mean, unless your top epidemiologist of your country happened to be your vice president, as in the case of Taiwan, he literally wrote the epidemiology textbook. And so the latest scientific findings, he can translate immediately to policy. Unless you are in such a country, we convincing your epidemiologist is not the same as we convincing your minister. And so, for example, Taiwan, as I said, begin health inspection for flight passengers from Wuhan to Taiwan the first day of January. And until the 10th, WHO still did not recommend health inspections. So if we had ministerial access earlier, everybody could have saved 10 days of time. I don't know how many lives, but 10 days at least of time.
Okay. And do you see something going forward these days? Do you see a reaction that makes you more positive, more optimistic?
Definitely. First, domestically, we see a lot of people caring very much about international humanitarian aid. The website called Taiwan Can Help Us, Taiwan Can Help That Us, lists precisely how we're helping other countries. And not only there's almost 5 million masks now, as I speak, it's passing the 5 million mark of donation from the Taiwanese people. You can see more than 300,000 names donating for humanitarian assistance. We also export the mask making machinery, so that all you have to provide is a parcel of land and electricity and water, and we will just help you setting up a local plant that churns out 2 million masks a day, 24 hours a day. And all these are just very simple ideas that spread very quickly. And I think these are the kind of Taiwan's model that we can share with the world. Of course, we're also working on vaccination, rapid tests, as well as antidotes for the coronavirus. And so, yeah, I'm quite optimistic, because on the pre-WHA meeting, the minilateral of 14 countries, many people are saying that they're learning quite a lot from the Taiwan model and can benefit immediately on an epicenter to epicenter basis. So we're not, in a sense, relying on the WHO with almost 200 countries voting. We're happy to have like 15 or 18 countries at a time forming a minilateral, and also on travel bubbles. That is another thing that we're working on right now, where the countries that have the coronavirus kept in check can now start considering free travel between the places.
So you kind of find a workaround around this WHO problem, and you just don't stop to try there, but you find other doors that you can walk through.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And using online teleconference, we see that there really is no limit of the outreach of people. For example, this live stream will probably reach potential people that I have previously no connection. But if you check out Taiwan Can Help That Us, then you will learn how to make connection to Taiwan and how Taiwan can help you. And so this open-ended communication and innovation is quite different from the traditional diplomacy of only professional diplomats talking to one another. This is not about bilateral relationship. This is about the various different YouTubers and even our vice president, the epidemiologist at the time, Chen Jianren, also became a YouTuber by recording a crash course on coronavirus 101, and that's translated into various languages. And so everybody can talk to everybody regardless of diplomatic relationship.
I have someone writing. You just said you might meet people that you haven't met before. You didn't have contact before. We have someone writing from South Korea, saying, "Thank you for the detailed information. My country, South Korea, you can read it now as well, is managing this crisis quite well, but I already see many differences regarding many points. For example, using the digital technology for tracking. I guess Taiwan didn't need to consider using it since the confirmed cases were higher. Let's say, for example, over thousands, with exceeds the tracking capacity of the system. Secondly, you said you're wearing masks to protect yourself, but in Korea we say it doesn't help much to protect. I go on the other screen. To protect yourself, but prevent other people from infection. What do you think of this different perspective? Is it based on scientific or academic ground or more cultural difference? Thanks in advance, Mu Hong.
Right. So thank you, Mu Hong. This is the kind of response I'm looking at. This is excellent. So yeah, the rationing system of mask distribution, where we installed in the pharmacies, where at the very beginning people alternate on different days based on their like national ID numbers and so on. That I think become Taiwan model. That's one of the first to be adapted to other jurisdictions. And South Korea, I believe, is the first one to directly use the mask pharmacy map, because our civil society developed such a map that showed in real time every 30 seconds, where are your nearby pharmacies? Where can you go there and use your national health insurance card to get the masks? And when you do so, if you're an adult, you purchase 9 masks. If you're a child, 10. After a couple of minutes, you refresh the map, and you will actually see the stock deplete in real time. If it actually grows when you purchase it, you call 1922 and report something bad is happening. And so because of that, it's like a distributed ledger. It holds everybody to account. And I believe the civil society people, the civic technologists in South Korea, took our concept and convinced the medical mask suppliers and pharmacists to publish the numbers on the same API as we did, so that the map developed in Tainan ended up becoming a very helpful tool for the South Korean people to find their nearby pharmacy, even though the original author, Jiang Mingzong, doesn't know anything about South Korea. So I think this is, again, a new way of diplomacy. This is social sector to social sector, people to people diplomacy. This is not about the signature of MOUs or pacts by professional diplomats. So I'm really happy that we have this epicenter to epicenter relationship. As for mask, it is true that this primarily protects other people. However, because our understanding of NCOV, of the coronavirus 2.0, isn't perfect. So how much it protects other people, that is currently still being evaluated. Of course, it helps. And however, when I say I wear this as a social signal to protect my hand from touching my face, and a social signal that says, I'm going to wash my hands properly and reminding you to do so. This is purely a social thing and a psychological thing. It's reminding myself, a self-reminder. And so I didn't talk anything about like the future capacity of medical mask versus surgical mask versus the mask that you do out of a t-shirt or things like that, because these need scientific evaluation. But the social signal part is very important, because then it can convince everybody to start wearing masks. And that is actually what we're trying to get at.
I have another question coming in, or more, you were talking about physical distancing.
Yeah.
And not social distancing. Is that something that's like you do it in purpose? Because in Germany, it's more about social distancing, but there's, it's a slightly different approach, I would say.
Well, it's actually dog distancing, and the CECC has a spokesdog. Literally, their participation officer lives with this dog. So whenever there's a press conference, they just go home and take a picture of the dog. And this is the dog distancing. And this says, if you're outdoor, you have to keep 2 dogs away from each other. That's 1 meter. If you're indoor, you have to keep 3 dogs away. That's 1.5 meter. And so, of course, we interchangeably use physical distancing and social distancing, but this is actually showed using this doga mimetic picture, and it's actually doga distancing or zongchai distancing. And we use very similar approaches, teaching people to cover your mouth and not do what this doga does, and doesn't touch your face with your hand, and this is what the mask is meant to remind people. It's just this cute dog.
I'm wondering which animal we should use in Germany. I think we should think about that later. But this is the humor instead of rumor approach, I believe.
Humor versus rumor, that's right. Another prominent example is when there's a tissue paper panic buy. Our Prime Minister, Su Zhenchang, he looks like this, just so that you know that his face shows this 2 hours, not even 2 hours after the rumor that says we're going to run out of tissue paper. He is wiggling his bottom a little bit here. And the title says that each of us only have 1 pair of bottoms. And this basically says you don't need to panic buy because the tissue paper came from South American materials, and medical masks, of which were ramping up from 2 million a day to 20 million a day, actually came from domestic materials. So this went viral. Everybody who saw this and laughed about this will not share the conspiracy theory about panic buying. And so the infodemic has a R value that's less than 1 after we pushed out this vaccine. And this vaccine went viral, have a very high R value. And so the rumor died down and the humor went up. And after that,
you didn't have a shortage. You didn't have a shortage in toilet paper at all.
No. This panic buying died down in 24 hours because this mimetic vaccination, this humor over rumor, actually worked. And we finally discovered the person who spread the rumor about tissue paper, and they're a tissue paper reseller.
But I remember one thing, Minister. I heard a talk with you in November, so before the coronavirus came to life, or at least we heard about it. And the interesting thing is that listening to you now and having listened to you in November shows me one thing. There's like a red line between it. So all the things you are introducing to us here didn't come from scratch. They came from scratch concerning the coronavirus, yes, but they didn't come from scratch talking about the thoughts behind them. Could you tell us, like, how did you get your government in that direction? Because that's quite special.
Yes. First of all, I think I talked in November a little bit about disinformation crisis, right? It's a global threat to authentic journalism everywhere. And we define in Taiwan that as intentional untruths that harms the public. And this is very important as a legal definition because it allows us to come up with counter infodemic strategies without sacrificing our core value, which is a liberal democratic value. According to Civicus Monitor, after the disinformation crisis, we are the only country in Asia that is still totally open when it comes to civil society freedom and freedom of speech and the press. And the reason why is that a lot of us still remember the martial law. I remember the martial law, much as how we remember SARS. And we remember not to go back at locking down an entire hospital. We need to come up with innovations that succeed without a lockdown. So the same, we understand that during the martial law, there's no press freedom, there's takedowns, there's disappearances, and so on. So we need to counter the infodemic by timely response, by a quick clarification that's guaranteed to produce an effect 2 hours after each trending rumor, 200 words or less, and 2 pictures. And at that time, I think I used this example, which is also our premiere. There was a rumor that said perming your hair will be subject to $1 million fine. And the premier says, I may be bald now, but I will not punish people who look like my youth. And what we have done is a labor requirement. And here, the premier, as he looks now, says, if you perm your hair multiple times a week, it will not damage your pocket, but it will damage your hair. Just look at me, at what happened to you. And so this is, again, a humor that makes fun of himself. He is not making accusations. He's not excluding part of the society. And people find this humor very viral. So when they share it, that dominates the search engine. And if you search for perm hair fine, you will find this funny picture. You will not find the original rumor. And that's why that rumor also died down within 24 hours without us compromising the online speech freedom and the journalistic freedom.
So that's about like technology, like knowledge of technologies and how technologies nowadays work. Okay. Yeah. But what you say is like the situation that Taiwan is in, like always under threat, like a society having to be very close to one another, with limited freedom outside the country, in a way. Is that something that brings you together and enables these ways, or would you say any liberal democracy in the world would be able to go this way?
Yeah, if you ask a random person in 2013, before the Sunflower Movement, before we occupied the parliament, whether it's possible for the government to respond within a couple of hours, whether you can just pick up a phone and tell the CECC and see a daily press conference, people will say you're crazy, because people were not at that time exposed to how technologies can help build democracy. People were at that time only exposed to how social media may be for entertainment, maybe for fighting each other, and not repurposing it, so to speak, to further democracy. It's because of the Sunflower Movement in March 2014, where 500,000 people were on the street and many more online, and they see how a live broadcasted, translated Occupy movement can eventually settle on 4 demand, and not one less, that eventually gets accepted by the head of the parliament. Do they finally understand, oh, we can use the same technology, but using it to further our democracy? And that is how the e-petition platform, the sandboxes, presidential hackathon, various day-to-day democratic mechanisms start being proposed and designed. So I'm not saying that you should occupy your parliament. I'm saying that it is a matter of imagination. If a lot of people start imagining it's possible, it will become possible.
But how can you make sure that these technologies you're promoting are not one day used against the idea you're promoting as well? It's because we see just, you know, your country is not far away from the Chinese coast, and there they use technology as well, but for other purpose. So how can you make this sure?
I talk about distributed ledgers and how the mass pharmacy availability map make the state transparent to the people. But of course, blockchains, as the PRC is using it now, can also be made to make citizens transparent to the state, which is also transparency, but a very different direction. So I think it matters a lot of where you're coming from, or what's your core value, what's accepted as norm in the society. If because of infodemic, because of pandemic, people are making sacrifices to their core values without questioning it, and then, of course, the danger of moving toward authoritarianism is real. But if people, because of pandemic, because of infodemic, says, no, we're not going back to the martial law, we're not going back to authoritarianism, and come up with social innovation that people think, actually, anybody can call 1922 and tell them how to improve our democracy, then everybody belong together. And that is why the CECC have a historically high approval rating of 94%. This is unheard of in a democracy. But we thank the remaining 6% because they keep us honest. They tell us we have to be accountable to the whole society of all the measures we're taking, digital or otherwise. And because we have not declared emergency situation, all the MPs, of course, can hold a hearing that keeps us in account.
How many people, the percentage maybe of the people in Taiwan really understand the technology behind this? Like, are you all hackers?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think when people listen to a 2 p.m. like hour-long press conference, literally every day after 3 weeks, everybody become amateur epidemiologists because they just hear of all those different scientific ideas in a very easy to communicate manner so many times. And so I'm reasonably confident if you ask a person how does the mask map actually work, or how home quarantine works, how the digital fence system work, I think a majority of people will be able to give you an accurate description.
Okay, but the background of my question was basically how much do you have to invest into education, like also digital education already in schools to make people trust at the one hand, but also deliver to the success of the whole model.
Yeah, of course, that's of essential importance. If people are curating data, if people are making media, producing media, then it's not about literacy. This is about competence, because we trust each and every citizen to be not only amateur epidemiologists, but also part-time journalists, part-time investigative journalists when they want to get to the bottom of the new coronavirus and how it works. And so by empowering citizens and making sure that fact-checking, for example, that's a crowd sport in Taiwan. Actually, during the presidential election, thousands of people volunteered to type each and every sentence of all the three presidential candidates in their platforms and fact-checked all the factual sentences in it, along with professional journalism. So if you have such a high participation, the cost of education is decentralized, is absorbed by everybody who want to make cute dog pictures. It's only when it's not participatory, people are apathetic, do you have to actually engage them through a lot of investment. So I think digital competence as part of the curriculum and broadband as human right as part of the digital strategy, that are the fundamentals, and we're not making any compromise on that. When we deploy 5G, we make sure we deploy starting with the places that has the fewer 4G connection, the fewer 4G platform, so that the entire country benefits from the 5G, especially around education and medicine and healthcare. And all of this ensures that the whole society remains engaged when there's a structural problem like infodemic or the pandemic.
5G is something that we are discussing right now in Germany and also the European Union. Mainly connected to the question whether we should work together with Huawei, which is a Chinese state-owned company. It's like, how are you dealing with this? You have 5G all over the country, but
part of the Sunflower movement. In the Sunflower movement, there's more than 20 NGOs around the occupied parliament, each deliberating about one aspect of the Cross-Strait Service and Trade Agreement, or the SCSSTA, and whether we need to allow PRC components in our 4G telecommunications.
PRC, just a second, PRC is the People's Republic of China. So not everybody here knows that, because we just say China usually.
That's right. So the PRC components in Taiwanese infrastructure in 4G, because at that point we're just investing in 4G infrastructure, was a matter of heated debate of people on the occupied parliament and on the street. And the consensus at the time is that there is no so-called market player in the PRC. Every market player potentially become a state-owned enterprise very quickly if the situation calls for it. And also the party control to those large enterprises is deemed too much a systemic risk, because if anybody in Taiwan did a cybersecurity audit and the new situation comes, maybe the infodemic, and then we depend on PRC components, then we have to also, in a very quick time, inspect each of their updates. And because we say that there is no real market player and it's all de facto state-owned, when necessary, the people on the occupied parliament decided to say no to PRC components in 4G infrastructure after 22 days of deliberation. And the National Communication Commission eventually said, okay, we accept the people's consensus. And so we had no Huawei components or other PRC components in our 4G infrastructure ever since then. So for us, this is a debate we had about 6 years ago. We're happy with the result that we got 6 years ago, and we advise every other countries to do the same systemic risk deliberation as we did during the Sunflower Occupy.
So obviously it works without components from the People's Republic of China.
Obviously. Well, we're still using 4G and now 5G connection now.
I know it's a bit tough for you to say as a minister in your official role, but I guess you follow the discussions going on in other Western countries, other liberal democracies. Like, how do you follow them? It's like you understand the point of people promoting using PRC components, or you just don't understand it at all.
Well, I'm digital minister working with the Taiwan government, but I'm also a board member of many international NGOs, the Digital Future Society in Barcelona, which is the think tank of the mobile world capital. Of course, they know something about 4G and 5G. And I'm also a board member of Radical Exchange in New York with Vitalik Buterin and Glenn Weil, and Vitalik being the co-creator of Ethereum, also have some thoughts about distributed ledger. And so, of course, I follow the various trends of thought and how they get applied to other jurisdictions. And I would say that I can understand from pretty much all the different positions. I can argue for all sides. I'm taking all the sides. But at the end of it, this is not about my personal opinion. This is about the rough consensus and the social norm in Taiwan. And when the people have voiced very clearly that they do not want PRC components in any of the basic infrastructures, 4G or 5G, it is my role then to communicate why people came to such an informed decision to the other countries. I'm not saying that you should all just copy Taiwan. I'm saying that you should follow what the Sunflower Occupiers did, which is have a whole of society deliberation.
So basically, what you tell us is governments do, at least in liberal democracies, what the civil society wants, and the civil society, if this kind of components is still discussed, and the civil society doesn't want it, the civil society is maybe not loud enough.
Well, I would say that maybe not speaking the same language as the professional public service. And I think in Taiwan, we're very fortunate in have people who are very senior career public service willing to learn about the technology that allows people to listen to each other at scale. And those technologies like the crowd law initiative, crowd.law, is also what we're actively contributing and advising other liberal democracies on.
One question, as we talked about the threats, or even more threats these days from the Chinese, like the People's Republic side, over the last weeks, some people discussing in the international community whether China might use the confusion within the pandemic to try to get Taiwan back into the one country policy, and maybe even invade it. It's like how important is all of what you were describing, this social innovation, digital innovation, in holding off this threat? Or is it even a problem because the more successful you are, the more complicated it is for the People's Republic of China accepting it?
Well, I think there's two things going on here. First, if we're successful in demonstrating that a liberal democracy can make no sacrifice in its core values in countering both the infodemic and pandemic, this becomes a natural kind of value-based ally that connects us together. Just as Taiwan is the first country in Asia to legalize marriage equality, legalizing all the bylaws and none of the in-laws, that's a very East Asian innovation. It connects us with all the like-minded society. So it makes a invasion, according to you, more costly, because then it will anger more people. It will make other people in the international community feel more like it's an atrocity instead of it's a kind of random island, right? And so this is the first thing. But the second thing also, and as important, is that we provide a safe haven for example, journalists. There's many journalists that are currently based in Taiwan. They wasn't based in Taiwan. They were based in Hong Kong or nearby jurisdictions. It's because Taiwan is the kind of only place now with a completely free civil society. Can they and Hong Kong students currently residing in Taiwan and many other people make informed choices about how they want to shape the course of history for the jurisdiction they care about? And the point here is that without Taiwan, Reporter Without Borders, as well as other like the Oslo Freedom Forum, the Open Tech Fund, the various other organizations will be very difficult to find a place that is close enough to the ground that can report fairly about Hong Kong and other nearby jurisdictions and get the world's attention on what's happening there. And so Taiwan also serves a proactive role, not just a defensive role.
We talked a lot about the status quo, what you already managed to do over the last years. Your government was re-elected just, I don't know, some months ago, I believe, not long ago. And you're still a young minister, but you're not going to be minister for the rest of your life, I believe.
No, so not. I'm a lowercase minister also, right? Which means I advocate about sustainability and digital transformation, and I believe I can be a lowercase minister for life.
But what is your, like, for the next 5 or 10 years to come? Let's say, what are the objectives you will be working on now? Because you succeeded in many things already, but I believe you still have something more ambitious to come.
Well, if it's 10 years from now, obviously it's meeting all the sustainable development goals, and I cannot do it alone, right? Everybody needs to work together. And because we now have a successful international solidarity on global scale issues, that is to say the pandemic, I believe that for circular economy, for managing the oceans resources responsibly, for making sure that we mitigate climate change and so on, we're now empowered as an international community, having a taste of what it actually looks like to have a successful minilateral or multi-stakeholder relationship to combat a global issue based on data, evidence, and science. And I think this will build our rapport across the international community to reach all the global goals by year 2030. I firmly believe in that, otherwise I would not be wearing this pin.
Okay. You were talking about how Taiwan helps others. What, like, coming to the end of this talk already, what is what Taiwan would wish from other liberal democracies in the world for the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, very good question. I think we would love to focus on the issues, right? So if you have, for example, if you're also facing issues like the infodemic, like circular economy, like how to make an open recovery that doesn't go back to the old linear economy. I know that Germany is very good on this regard, and so on. Then Taiwan can help, and Taiwan is helping. And we would very much welcome this kind of meaningful relationship through the minilateral, as I talk about, global cooperation and training framework, and so on, to make sure that our innovations translates to your innovations and vice versa. And I think this is far more important than any of those very large, like 200 member international organizations, because what we're focusing now has a time frame, right? Every outbreak epicenter is either 2 months before or 2 months after every other epicenter. So it makes sense to act agile, and it makes sense to form just this kind of minilaterals around just one issue like the travel bubble, and then expand it to other sustainability-based issues. So yeah, Taiwan can help, and talk to your local friendly Taiwan ambassador.
Okay, you may not remember, but you, I think in November, you invited me on Twitter to come to visit Taiwan.
Yes.
Which was basically a surprise to me, because I had never considered before visiting Taiwan, but since then, my wife and I, we are really considering. But now it's like you can do some advertising. What is Taiwan famous for? Why should people come to Taiwan apart from the political and the digital innovation part?
And the fact that you're completely safe now, that we have a month with no local confirmed cases. Well, I think
would it be possible nowadays to travel to Taiwan? Your borders are open. Could I catch a flight tomorrow, come?
That's the travel bubble we're talking about. So we're now working with the jurisdictions that have also similar level of low confirmed corona cases. Otherwise, of course, you can write me an email, but you still have to go through 14-day quarantine on your official visits. Currently, that's how we keep the society open, because we do very strict border quarantine regulations. But the point is that if you do manage to, after the 14-day home quarantine, you will find that the food is excellent. The people are very nice. There's more than 20 national languages, which means more than 20 cultures for you to explore. If you like hiking, if you're like ocean sports and so on, Taiwan is ideal for those as well. But most of all, I think you will see a culture that really respects the diversity in each and every of us. We're truly a transcultural republic of citizens. And you can see, no matter how kind of small your group is, you can find interest group in Taiwan that matches your interest.
Thanks so much, Minister Audrey Tang, Digital Minister of Taiwan, the most liberal democracy in Asia, and I would say even one of the most liberal democracies nowadays in the world. So thanks for your time, thanks for your insight, and all the best to Taiwan, and hope to talk to you soon, or maybe meet you one day in person.
Yeah, of course, and stay safe and have a good local time.
Thank you so much, and thanks everybody who has joined us. And for those who are proficient in German, on Thursday, I will be talking to Gabor Steingart about the future of media at, I think it's 6 p.m. German time. So who is interested, join then. And thanks everybody, and see you soon.